Morning everyone. Welcome back. Monday morning, 10 o'clock again, and we are looking at the ankle and foot again. So this is our fourth session, I think, for the ankle and foot. So we did the bones initially, then we started to look at the ligaments and the connective tissue and the retinacular around the foot, which then led us up to the muscles and the compartments which go through that connective tissue. So we did the anterior compartment last week, and now we're going to have a look at the other. Hopefully, do all of the other three compartments of the leg, and then next week we'll have a look at the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So that's the plan. We got Becky's back. Morning, Becky. Haven't seen you for a while. Welcome back. And Julie and Neil, we've got some regulars in as well. Cool. So yeah, just wanted to do a little bit of a recap of stuff. And before we do that, we've got the anatomy labs coming up. So the picture just there. So if you want to join me in the labs in London or Keele University, then you can go to clinicalanatomy.education and you can join me there. So basically, what we do, if you've never been to one of these things before, you get gowned up, get your gloves on, and initially, first of all, we just have a bit of a briefing about the Human Tissue Act, and because you're bound by lots of laws when you go into these anatomy labs, and then once you do that, you're literally straight into the labs, and we usually divide the groups up into upper and lower limb, depends what's there on the day. And then one group will do upper limb, and basically you'll be able to lift up things and move things and have a look at real tissue. Okay, so if you've never done that kind of thing before, then yeah, so kind of like gradual. We try to do it in a gradual way, a gradual introduction to it. There's a few people in the group that have done it before. Yeah, so if you can make it, that will be great. Just pop that there. It makes a lot of things that we talk about on here kind of come to life. And bless you. I knew there was a reason you came back, Becky. Thank you. Yeah, so Becky came to the one in Keele back in June, I think it was June, July, and yeah, we had a really good time. The clinicians there are brilliant, and very different to KCL, King's College. King's College is a very old university, old labs, and Keele is brand new, up to date. But the cadavers are the same no matter where you go, but they're just differing facilities. That's all. So yeah, glad you enjoyed that. Yeah, and Stevie's joining us as well. Good morning, Stevie. I know you're coming to the one in London, so that'd be good. Be good to see you there. And although we've conversed a lot online, I've never met you, so it'd be nice to meet you as well. And I think a lot of you guys are coming to Therapy Expo if you're living in the UK. That's on the 24th, 25th of November in Birmingham. So I can't not go. It's in my home city. Right, let's have a look at this first. Just going to do a quick recap. Don't want to look at that one a sec. Just jumping ahead. So just going to do a quick recap of the compartments. Just see if I can get the right. Just see if I can get the right PowerPoint. Here we go. Let's go on this one. Just scooch back a little bit. Go back for a few of those. Just want to recap a couple of things. Here we go. So, hey, morning, Dan. Morning. Good to see you. Keel, I hope. Yeah. Oh, did you? Oh, sorry, Stevie. Oh, that must have been a biomechanics thing. Yeah, I was going to say I don't think we've properly had a chat. So yeah, apologies if we have. I do apologise. Right, let's have a look at this. So let's go forward one. Come on. There we go. Okay, so we've got these different compartments in the leg. Okay, so the anatomically the leg is from the knee down to the ankle, and then the thigh is from the knee up to the hip. So yeah, when we say leg, we often say lower leg, but actually it's in anatomical terms it's the leg, and then the thigh above that. So in the leg, we've got two main bones which we've had a look at. So we've got your tibia here and your fibula here. And over the last few weeks, we've had a look at the different compartments around this area. So we've got these things called septum, and the septum, if you imagine like a top-down view of a big field in the UK especially, and it's all divided by hedges, by hedgerows. That's basically what this is like. So a septum is a hedge. Okay, so it's the divide in between those areas. Oh, good. Thanks, Stevie. Yeah, save my blushes. Okay, so we've got this. This is the compartment we looked at last week. So we looked at the anterior compartment, and there's a septum just behind it, which is the interosseous membrane. And we would Dan Williams posted something in the group. I think it was yesterday, and it was about compartment syndrome in the thigh. And what happened to the guy's leg after he had a compartment syndrome there. So you can have compartment syndromes in all different parts of the body because everything's surrounded by this connective tissue, and it really does kind of make me laugh. With a member of quite a few massage groups, and there's still this debate going on about the effects that we can have on fascia, and I mean, you've seen the stuff now on the videos, and it's uh, and how you could possibly separate. Okay, this is a fascial treatment. This is one that's gonna influence the muscles, and the muscles are the fascia, and the fascia are the muscles. They're not separate entities. They're all kind of wrapped into one. And sorry if you're having breakfast. I know it is fairly early. It's a bit of a late breakfast, but there we go. We're going to go with it anyway. But I spent probably about 6 hours when I did the dissections that I did, picking out individual strands of fascia from the pec muscles. Okay, so it is everywhere. It is absolutely everywhere. It's in everything. And there is no way by touching the skin and going at different pressures that you can affect different tissue. You will affect everything via the nervous system. Okay, so yeah, that debate is still going on. Yeah, last week we also, or the week before, we had a look at these intermuscular septums as well. So this is an anterior one, and this is on the side of the leg, and it attaches to your fibula, and it is the divide between your anterior compartment and your lateral compartment. So we're going to have a look at that today. We're going to have a look at the muscles there. And then posterior to that lateral compartment, getting our anatomical terminology correct, is this one here. Just move me out of the way. The posterior intermuscular septum. So see here, we've got this space which is the lateral compartment. This space here is the anterior, and then that posterior intermuscular septum divides the lateral compartment from the superficial posterior compartment. And hopefully we'll get to all the rest of these three today. Fingers crossed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we have to use the right tone of voice when we say you can't alter it. Yeah, yeah, it's very 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 frustrating. Yeah, there we go. I think I'll leave that there. Right then, let's go through the right. Okay, so I learned a really cool. So I'm was doing some scanning last week. I'm doing a master's in ultrasound scanning, and we had a session with this. Well, she is the woman that is ultrasound scanning in the UK. She's written all the books and everything. So it was brilliant to be taught by her. And she taught me a little way to remember these muscles in the anterior compartment. So when we're scanning them, And if we look here, we've got tibialis anterior, so T, extensor hallucis, which was for your big toe. And if you've not heard of these before, we did them last week, so you can have a look at that. And then D is your digitorum. So, and they go in order, and it's Tom hates Dick. There you go. So, I've heard of another one, which we're going to have a look at for the deep posterior compartment, and we'll talk about that today. But yeah, for the anterior compartment, tibialis anterior, then you've got your extensor hallucis, then you've got your extensor digitorum, and it's in that order, medial to lateral. So it's Tom hates Dick, and that's the way they go. Okay, so that was a new one for me, so I thought I'd share that with you guys. I don't know whether you've heard that one before. We went through all of these muscles, so I'm just going to skim through these, and I want to get to. Here we go. Okay, so now we're on the lateral compartment, so the one on the outside of your leg. Okay, so where the fibula is, we've got muscle attachments on the side here that go around this bony lump here, which is your lateral malleolus, so your outside ankle bone. Okay, so we're going to have a look at those. So the first one, these are often called perineals. And we talked about this last week with trying to rename areas of the body after anatomical landmarks. I'm not sure again where perineals comes from. So Dan, you did a great job last week with the week before with the deltoid ligament. So if you want to have a look with the origin of perineals, that would be good. But we tend to call them fibularis muscles now because obviously they run along the fibula. And it makes it a lot easier for you to remember. So if you remember where the fibula is, then you know that there are fibularis muscles. And they're in the lateral compartment. They're in that outside compartment. And if we have a look at the actions of them, so they evert the foot. So what that means, if you think about the sole of the foot, this is your little toe and big toe here. So when you evert, the sole of the foot turns outwards. Okay, so I can't move this model very well, but it will go that way. So that's eversion. And then inversion is where the sole of the foot goes in, like that. Okay, so eversion that way, inversion that way. And it's a bit of a combination of movements in the rear foot, the midfoot, and the forefoot, but we'll talk about that later on. So evert and plantarflex the foot, so that means pointing the toes. And the attachment is on the first metatarsal and the medial cuneiform. So we'll be able to have a look at that in a second. But this is a really, really long muscle, hence the name longus. It sits up really high on the fibula. So if you have a look here, it's the proximal 2/3 of the lateral fibula. So proximal means closest to the middle of the body. Distal means furthest away. Okay, so this is the proximal 2/3. So it covers 2/3 of the upper part of your fibula, and then the tendon runs behind your lateral malleolus, and then it goes underneath your foot. Okay. Morning, everyone who's just coming in. Welcome. And then we've got peroneus brevis, and brevis means short. So anything with longus in the name means long. Anything with brevis means short. And this one is the distal 2/3 of the lateral fibula. So it sits underneath the fibularis longus, and then it runs along in exactly the same direction, but instead of going underneath the foot, which we'll have a look at in a bit more detail, it attaches onto the fifth metatarsal, so the base of the fifth just there. Okay, so you can have avulsion fractures in this area. So if you turn your ankle, so you have an inversion sprain, so the foot goes in, it then lengthens the fibularis muscles, and you can get, as well as ligament injuries, you can also injure these muscles because they're going to be elongated as well. Not necessarily longus. Longus is unlikely to get injured, but sometimes brevis, because of where it attaches right on that base of the fifth, then it can avulse this bit here, so it will basically pull off that knobbly bit on the side of your foot. Okay, and so when someone rolls their ankle, you have to think, okay, is it just ligament or is there muscle involvement as well? And quite often what you'll see if there is a muscular injury is you'll see a lot of bleeding as well as the usual swelling. And the bleeding will usually be in the sole of the foot because the blood will run down the compartment into the sole of the foot. Okay, so that's something to look out for. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's have a look at those. There we go. Just switch this. Get rid of that one. Okay, so this is the lateral compartment. Just bring that up there, hopefully. Bear with me a second. Just get rid of all those. Oh, there's me. That's no good. Why isn't that showing? Bear with me a second. Just try and get this one up. Oh, I've got it all queued up as well. Bear with me a second. I'll just try and drag that somewhere else. Oh, that's no good. Bear with me 1 second and I'll just reload this video. So, lateral compartment, here we go. Right. Here we go. Just make that a bit bigger there. Okay, right. Let's just play that from the beginning. Sorry about that. Right then. Just pause that there. Okay, so yeah, like I said before, brevis means short. So anything with brevis in the name, you'll see some in the foot as well. So we've had, which ones have we looked at? We looked at the extensors. So we've had extensor digitorum longus and extensor hallucis longus. There's also extensor digitorum brevis and extensor hallucis brevis as well. So there are short muscles as well as the long ones. Quite similar to in the hand, where the long muscles started in the hand around the elbow, the long muscles in the ankles start up around the shin, and then they travel down into the toes, and then the short muscles are in the foot. Okay, so we're going to have a look at those later. So we've got two sets of muscles that both extend the digit and flex them, and extend the big toe. So we'll have a look at those when we get to it. So here we've got, just give you a bit of a quick orientation. So there's your lateral malleolus, just there where they're pointing. And then this is your peroneus brevis or fibularis brevis on the outside, just there. So let's run through this. So there's the attachment. So that was the distal 2/3 of the fibula. Okay, so that's the attachment for that muscle. So it's got quite a broad attachment. So all along there, I'm just going to move that arrow out of the way just so it doesn't get confusing. So these run down the side of your leg, and then there's peroneus longus there. Okay, just pause that there. So longus means long. It overlays the brevis. Okay, so it's on top of the brevis, just there. And then your proximal fibular head is just up here. So that's the when we get to the knee, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But you should be able to feel that on the outside of your knee. You've got the fibular head, and that's just underneath that is where your peroneus will, or peroneus longus will attach. So if you palpate your fibular head, so have a feel of the lumpy bit on the side of your knee, basically on the side of the tibia, and then if you evert your foot, you'll be able to feel the fibularis longus engage as you evert. Okay, it's quite an easy one to feel. It's really superficial. Okay, so there's your lateral malleolus. So the fibularis muscles wrap around that malleolus. So there's your fibula. There's a little gap just there. Okay, so where the peroneus longus attaches, or fibularis longus, there are two kind of attachment points, and then there's a little gap in between, and that's really important for later because we've got some structures that travel through that gap to get into the anterior compartment. Okay, so that's remember that for later. So there's your interosseous membrane in between the tib and fib. And there you go. So that's your peroneus longus, and then this is the gap just there. So there's a little gap in between the heads of peroneus longus or fibularis longus. It's going to take me ages to get out of using perineals. Okay, and then here, this is the kind of stuff that we saw before. So this is the connective tissue around the ankle that keeps all the tendons really close. So there's your tendons coming down there. That bit there is your lateral malleolus. And then can you see these bands of fascia? This is the retinaculum that we looked at a few weeks ago. So this retinaculum pins the fibularis tendons down, and in an extreme ankle injury you can rupture the retinaculum, and then the peroneal tendons will just pop out and flick over the lateral malleolus. Okay, so you can have some injuries to this area, just things to be aware of. So we've got longus and brevis coming down here, and then you'll see that one there, that looks like the brevis tendon going towards that fifth metatarsal. So we'll have a look at that in a second. So there's your lateral malleolus tendons, just move me over there. Tendons of your longus and brevis wrapping around the ankle and then underneath that or through that retinaculum, so it's keeping it all in place. And there's your peroneus brevis tendon. So that's the short tendon that attaches onto your fifth metatarsal. And it attaches just there. So you can see from where it goes and where it attaches, that's the reason when that muscle shortens, it's going to evert the foot. Yeah, it makes sense. And you'll also get some plantar flexion with the foot as well. You'll be able to point your toes a little bit just because of the angle around the malleolus. So there's your, just pause that there. So that's your longus tendon just there. And they're in the tendon sheath just there, that retinaculum. They've got their own individual holes to go through. Okay, so and that they can become irritated, and you can get a synovitis around that area where the synovial lining becomes irritated and inflamed. So that's something else to look out for. It can become quite enlarged. Okay, so the tendons can become tendinopathic, and then they struggle to go through those regions. And then this one here, the brevis, comes down onto the base of the fifth. So this longus tendon is going to sweep underneath the foot, and you'll see that in a second. So there it goes on its travels all the way under there. So it comes all the way across, just pause that there. So I've put up here, remember the short and long plantar ligaments. So back in either session 1 or session 2, we had the short plantar ligament that stopped just before the peroneus longus tendon. And then the long plantar ligament went over the top of it and formed like a roof over the top. And that's important to protect that tendon. Okay, so that's one of the reasons, well, one of the reasons why we think it's there. So peroneus longus tendon comes all the way underneath there and attaches just there. Oh, I missed it. It was too short. There we go. Just try and pause that there. Okay, so it attaches to the medial cuneiform, so that bone just there, which we covered in the first session, and then the base of the first metatarsal, which is just there. Okay, so Steve has asked a question: is that a particular football injury issue? I guess you're talking about the retinacular injuries, and yes, they'd be quite common, especially with fractured dislocation injuries, but even extreme inversion sprains as well. Yeah, so it's just stuff to look out for, because sometimes with an extreme injury like that, it's very rarely just one thing. It's normally a combination of things. So it would be just something else to keep an eye on. Cool. So that's those are the peroneals, or the fibularis muscles that run in that lateral compartment down the outside. Hopefully, the queuing of these other videos will work. Let's just have a look. Just get rid of that one and that one. Oh, good. Yeah, they're working. Right, I'll just set those up for later. Bear with me a sec. Right, let's have a look at these. Okay, so that was those two. So there's only two in that lateral compartment. Now we're going to the deep posterior compartment. Okay, so if I'm just going to scooch back a few slides. Bear with me a second. There we go. Forward one. Oh, I'm like the supply teacher today. He doesn't know how to work the video. Right, okay, so we've got anterior compartment. That's the first one we looked at. Lateral compartment is the one we've just looked at. So you can see the fibula there, and that's where your fibularis longus and brevis attach, and they run through this compartment here. So they've got their own a compartment on their own. Okay. What we're going to have a look at next is this one. This is the deep posterior compartment. So this is on the back of the tibia and the back of the fibula, and there's also a lot of attachment as well on this interosseous membrane, so the membrane between the two. Okay, so we're going to have a look at that and see the muscles in there. And this is another little kind of Tom, Dick and Harry thing. So the first one was Tom hates Dick, and then this one is Tom, Dick and Harry. So let's just go through those. Here we go. Okay, so we've got three muscles in the deep posterior compartment. So that area just behind the tibia, just behind the fibula, just behind their interosseous membrane. Okay, so it's all separated by that membrane. So we've got flexor digitorum longus. And if you remember back to the anterior compartment, we had the opposite, we had extensor. So the front compartment extends the toes, the back compartment flexes the toes. So all of your flexion of the toes comes from this area. So flexor digitorum is your digits, so toe 2 to 5, and then flexor hallucis is your big toe. Okay, so and it only goes to the big toe. And we were again doing some scanning on this, and they were showing us some images, and quite often you get adaptation to the exercises that you do, and you'll have increased tendon size and increased muscle size depending on what you do. And this woman who was showing us on last Wednesday, she dealt with ballet dancers that were on point for quite a long period of time. And she said their flexor hallucis longus was really, really developed, and it would look like a tibialis anterior muscle, which is really, really chunky. Normally, they're not that well defined, but obviously because of what the ballet dancers do, their body is adapted, and the tendon and the muscle sizes have grown. Okay, so sometimes it might be like, that looks a bit strange, but actually because of their history and because of what they do, their body's just adapted to the activity. And then the other muscle that's there is tibialis posterior, and because it's on the back of the tibia. Okay, so these are the three we're going to have a look at now. So I'll just give you a rundown on here. So tib post is on the back of the tibia, and it runs down. This time it's on the medial aspect, so it's on the so the last one was on the outside, this fibula area, so the lateral compartment. This one starts on the back, and then they run medially, so they go around the medial malleolus. All right, it can be a bit confusing sometimes because there's no medial compartment. This one's a deep compartment, but they come through and then wrap around the medial malleolus here. Okay, and there's quite a lot of important structures on this medial joint line, which we'll have a look at in a sec. So it attaches onto your second, third, and fourth metatarsals and your navicular. So it's got quite a wide spread. So it comes underneath the malleolus and then fans out onto the bottom of your foot. And if you have a look at what it does, this one inverts the foot. So the lateral compartment everted the foot. The deep posterior compartment will invert your foot. Okay, and because of the line of pull around with the retinacula, it will also aid in plantar flexion. So plantar flexion and inversion is what the deep posterior compartment will help with. Okay, And then the next one, so we've got flexor digitorum longus. So this flexes your digits. So on the back of the tibia again, so posterior surface of the tibia in that deep posterior compartment. Siri's talking to me now. And then it goes into your distal phalanges of the toes, so all the way down into the toes. And we'll have a look at the tendons for that. So it flexes your toes, plantar flexes, and inverts the foot. So they all working together. And then the last one is your hallucis. So this is just for your big toe. Okay, so this goes all the way down to the big toe, distal phalanx of the big toe, flexes the toe, plantar flexes, inverts. So can you see that there's a bit of a pattern with the compartments? A lot of the compartments, the muscles in them, they go to different places, but they all do a very similar job. Okay, so to be able to try to isolate these structures is really, really difficult, because as soon as you activate the movement, you activate them all. Okay, so it's really difficult to say, oh yeah, that's doing that and that's doing that. They all work together. So let's have a look at the videos for these. Joe, I couldn't get it going before. Now it's going on its own. Hold on, let's just. Right, let's have a look. So this one. Okay, it's not that one I wanted to see. Just get rid of these. That's the one. Okay, cool. So this is Tom of Tom, Dick, and Harry. So Tom is your tibialis posterior, Dick is your flexor digitorum, and Harry is your flexor hallucis. Okay, so Tom, Dick, and Harry on these ones, and they run in order from front to back. Okay, so nearest the medial malleolus is your tibialis posterior. Next one along is your flexor digitorum. Next one along is your flexor hallucis. So we're going to have a look at the tib post, and then we'll bring in the rest as well. So there's your tib post. So that is your tibia, just there. There's your tib post muscle. So real chunky muscle, sits really high up on the tibia as well. So it starts really high, and then it's got a really long tendon. And this is one of those areas where if you feel the inside of someone's shin and it's tender, and we call that a medial tibial stress syndrome, tibialis posterior may be involved in that. So it's one of the things that you might want to look at. So there's your tib post tendon. And there's the attachment. So attachment on the, let me just pause that actually, because I've labelled that quite well there. There we go. Okay, so we've got interosseous membrane, a bit on the fibula, a bit on the tibia. So it's a real broad attachment point there. Oh, cool. Simon's there. Hey, cool. Let me just put that up, otherwise people won't have a clue what I'm talking about. So Al has got Simon from the STA with us for staff training. Brilliant. Welcome, team. That's really good. And hello, Simon, as well. So we've got fib head at the top there. Okay, so that's a lateral aspect. Fibula, obviously here. That's your interosseous membrane, and there's your tibia. So just give you a bit of an example. So if we think about the structures that have been taken off, we've taken off your calf muscles. We'll talk about those in a sec. We've taken off as well the other muscles underneath that, which we're talking about now. So Tom, Dick, and Harry. And then we're down to the bones on the back of the leg. Okay, so that's where we are. So we're going to add the layers back on now, and it goes all the way under. Just get rid of my arrow, because otherwise it will confuse things. There we go. Okay, so the tibialis posterior will sweep to the back of the medial malleolus, which is this lumpy bit here. So that's your inside ankle bone. You've got your calcaneus there, your heel bone. So it will sweep underneath there, and it will go through its own tube. So the retinacular on the medial aspect, it will go through its own pathway. Okay. Then this is your talus bone. So we talked about that on previous sessions. There are no muscles that attach to the talus. So it will go underneath or alongside the talus. There's your navicular. So it will attach onto there, and it will also attach onto the medial cuneiform. Okay, so and right underneath as well, and then it spreads out onto the metatarsals as well. So we'll have a look at that in a second. move that there. Here we go. So there it is in its retinacular. So there's the connective tissue covering. There's your tib post tendon coming all the way down under there, and then it's going to sweep under in a second. I've got a really good video of the tendons in a bit, and then there it is attaching onto there. So navicular tuberosity, medial cuneiform, and then so that's those two, and then it will sweep underneath. There we go, and it will attach onto the base of your metatarsals as well. So it's quite a wide tendon on the bottom of the foot. And one of the main jobs with this as well is not just to invert the foot, which is what will happen when you concentrically contract that muscle, but when you step onto the ground and then your foot flattens, so you go into pronation, and pronation is fine, by the way, it's not a bad thing. You have to be able to pronate. It's whether you can resupinate that's the problem. So as you come down and then it flattens, your tibialis posterior will control that flattening. Okay, so as the heel hits the floor, the tibialis posterior will control the speed at which the foot pronates. And that's really important because that's often missed, and especially with people. I mean, where are we now? We're in November time, so people kind of back off their exercises now. January, they go, right, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to do loads of HIIT classes and jumping around, and then they end up with a sore foot and think they've got plantar fasciitis, but it could be because they've overloaded the muscles that control that pronation supination of the foot. So it's, again, you need to think about those things when you're assessing the foot too. So there you go, second, third and fourth met, and that's where it attaches. So it sweeps all the way underneath. So that was Tom of Tom, Dick and Harry. So the next one we're going to have a look at is, hopefully, just cue this one up. Yeah, it's working this time. This is Dick. Okay, so just put that back there. So there's your tibia. There's your medial malleolus. Looks a bit of a mess at the moment, but we'll have a look at it in a bit more detail in a sec. So flexor digitorum wrapping around, and this is the interesting bit. There's a little hole there, okay, and so if you remember from the last bit, tibialis posterior started here, so it started a bit more laterally, okay, but then it ends up being the first tendon around the malleolus. So it has to cross at some point, and this is the point that it crosses. So this is the flexor digitorum longus origin. Okay, then there's a little gap, and the tibialis posterior that was up here, the tendon of it goes through that gap. Okay, and then wraps underneath the malleolus, and that's why it ends up closest to the medial malleolus. And then your digitorum then runs behind it. Okay, so that's why it goes Tom, Dick, and then Harry, which is useful for the acronym, because if it went in the order where it started, then it wouldn't work. So we've got flexor digitorum, little bit of a gap, which is where your tibialis posterior will run through, and then that starts to then wrap around the ankle. Perfect. Let's have a look at flexor digitorum. Oh, don't want me. Flexor hallucis, sorry. Here we go. So now this is the last one, flexor hallucis. Just go right back to the beginning again. Here we go. So flexor hallucis is the most lateral. This one doesn't flip under anything. And then the tendon is the one furthest back. So it's the most posterior tendon. So they look like, when they come out the other side, they look like this. And just take that back. There we go. Okay, so if you can see here, so there's your flexor digitorum, that one just there, and that around that area will be where the gap is. Okay, so that'll be where the gap is, and there's your tib post coming through. So the tib post will have started more laterally, and then it comes through that gap and becomes the first tendon that's on that medial malleolus. Then your digitorum, and then your flexor hallucis. So there's your Tom, Dick, and Harry. Okay, and then when they come into the foot, see them in a sec. There they are there. Okay, so there's your flexor digitorum. So it goes from one tendon and then splits into four, and then joins into the phalanges of the toes. Okay, and then your flexor hallucis is that big chunky one there, and that's the one we were talking about before. That was like really prominent on ballet dancers, and that one just goes into the big toe. There you go. There's flexor hallucis just there. Cool. What time are we on? Okay, cool. We got enough time. Good. Right, let's finish off this last compartment. So we've done anterior, which is where all the extensors were. So extensor digitorum, extensor hallucis, plus your tibialis anterior. Then lateral, fibularis longus and brevis. And then deep posterior, so that one right in the, right behind the tibia and the fibula, and just behind their interosseous membrane, tibialis posterior, flexor digitorum longus, flexor hallucis. Okay, so those are the compartments so far. The last compartment is this one. Done those. Is your superficial posterior. So this is the one you can feel. Yeah. So if you squeeze the muscles on the back of your leg, these are the muscles that you're going to be able to palpate. There is another muscle in there as well that is not usually included on the posterior compartment, but we've got plantaris as well. So I'm going to show you that one too. So we've got gastroc, which is your calf muscle. So gastrocnemius, really big muscle at the back. And I was asked a question about this the last time we delivered it, and gastrocnemius is like a full belly. Okay, so it's because it's quite a big muscle, and that's where gastroc comes from, like gastric. So you've got these big muscles on the back, and it's one muscle but split into two heads, and both of the heads, if we have a look here, so the origin is the posterior lateral, so on the back and to the outside, and then medial condyles of the femur. I haven't got it on that model, but it will cross the knee basically. So it goes up and then it splits and crosses the knee and attaches onto the femur, and then it goes into your Achilles tendon. So we'll have a look at this a bit more when we cover the knee. This is the one we'll focus on at the moment. And then the other muscle that's deep to that is, I pronounce it soleus, some people call it soleus, it's whatever, potato, whatever, tomato. So you've got the soleal line and then the posterior tibia and fibula. So it attaches onto the back of the tib and the fib. If you think about when we were looking at the investing fascia, the deep investing fascia last week, hopefully that will give you an idea of the depth of these tissues. So they go, and the soleus is huge. Soleus is a massive muscle. So those are the two main ones. Let's have a look at the videos of these. So just get rid of those. Hopefully this will work. Here we go. Okay. So let me just pause that there. So this is the superficial posterior compartment. So superficial means towards the surface, and so if you just take the skin off, take the first layer of fat off, plus the superficial fascia, then this is what you'll get. So these are the two heads, and then they go up and onto the femur, just up there, and then that there is your Achilles, and it's really long. Okay, it's a lot longer than I imagined when I first started learning this stuff. And this area here is called the musculotendinous junction. So it's where the muscle turns into tendon. You can just see just there, that's the edge of the soleus muscle, just there. So the soleus kind of spills out from underneath, okay, and fills especially the bottom part of your leg. Okay, so your gastrocs are usually quite high, and then the soleus is quite wide and underneath, and you can usually feel those either side. And the soleus joins into the Achilles as well. So you've got muscle at the back, muscle at the front, and then they both go into the same tendon. So let's have a look at that. So those are the heads. There's your soleus just there. So you can see it kind of bursting out the sides. And then medial lateral head of the gastroc, so inside and outside head. And then this is where it attaches. So this is your femoral condyle, just up here. So condyle means a knuckle. So these are the knuckles of your knee. This is at the back. So we've got medial and lateral just there. And that's where your gastroc will attach onto. And then it will come all the way down into the Achilles and attach onto your calcaneus. So as will the soleus. But the soleus starts below the knee. We'll have a look at that in a sec. So there are the heads. There's the musculotendinous junction. And you might see that in MRI reports. So if you got an MRI report from someone and it says MTJ, that's basically what it means. OTJ is osseous tendinous junction. So the join between the tendon and the bone. So if you were going to go a little bit further down here where the Achilles is, then that goes into the calcaneus. The OTJ, osseous tendinous junction, is often called the enthesis as well. So there's all these terms that kind of mean the same thing. I'm just going to write that on there because you might not have heard of that before. So that's where the tendon attaches into the bone. It's called the enthesis or enthesis. Sometimes it's pronounced. Okay, so if you want to have a look that word up if you've not heard of it before. Okay, yeah. So you can see. Look, there's the fascial connection as well between the soleus and the tib, and the gastroc, and then there is your calcaneal tendon or Achilles tendon. Okay, so you can see how wide that soleus is. It's huge, huge, huge muscle, and quite often you will injure biarticulate muscles. So ones that cross two joints. So your gastroc is more likely to get injured than your soleus, and but soleus is often under trained, under thought about. You can there is a thought that you can bias the soleus, although there is some recent research to say it doesn't work like that. But if you bend the knee and do bent knee calf raises, you disadvantage the gastrocnemius because it crosses the knee, so you shorten that muscle, and then you can then start to overload more the soleus. So although I have read something recently that said you still work the gastroc just as much anyway. So yeah, it's a kind of, I don't know whether it's old school yet or not. I'll have to have a look at it in a bit more detail. So here is the soleus. So this is underneath the gastroc. So gastrocs have been taken off. Look at the size of that huge, huge muscle. There's your perineals down this side, or fibularis muscles. There's your that's the cut line of the Achilles tendon. So you can see where the gastroc attaches in. But this is the attachment point. Look how massive that attachment is. This is a really powerful plantar flexor. So jumping, running, this is going to be doing a lot of that work. Okay, so that's your soleus. And then the last one, just to finish off, is your plantaris. Okay, and this is a really, really thin muscle. Well, it's a small muscle at the top, a really, really thin, long tendon. And it's often used in surgery. So if you need a ligament or a tendon repair, they will usually use plantaris, and it's because it doesn't really do much, you can live without one basically. Okay, so if we it's a bit like palmaris longus in the forearm. So if we have a look at this, so really, really long tendon. So your attachment is right up here, okay, on the femur, and then the tendon runs all the way down here and then joins into the Achilles. Now sometimes it is like this one looks like it is, it's separate, and if you have medial Achilles pain, it may be the plantaris tendon that's causing the problem. Rehab treatment is kind of the same anyway, but just something to bear in mind. But I've seen cadavers where the plantaris is basically merged into the Achilles tendon right up here. and there is no separate tendon. It just joins in, and you can't differentiate between the two. So there are variations in this as well. But that is your medial um, Achilles, and that's where your plantaris will attach. Okay, bit of a long session today, but I wanted to get all the compartments done so we can move on to the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So if anybody's got any questions about anything, then you can give me a shout in the group during the week. If there's something that you want to see that you haven't seen, let me know, or something you want a bit more information about, then that's fine. Yeah, yeah, it is. Certain things that don't do much. Yeah, I think it's a bit like the appendix, isn't it? You know, we obviously needed that years gone by, but now with the way that we live and the diets we have, we don't really need it, and it causes us more bother than it does good. So I guess we're evolving, Stevie. There are some people who don't have a palmaris longus. There's a peroneus tertius as well. I think it's something like 18% of the population has one, and so a lot of people don't have one. And yeah, it all part of evolution, I guess. Yeah, cool. No probs, guys. We'll see you next Monday at 10 o'clock. Have a good week. See you then.